Greetings all, this is Hairy Nick back once again to talk about some X-Wing 2.0 spoilers. It just seems I can't get away from this at the moment, but I'm not going to complain. Lots of really cool stuff to look at. Over the past couple of days we had a large leak, or at least a kind of leak. I'm not quite sure what's going on here. Basically there's a very large gaming expo going on in the UK as we speak at the time of recording here, and one of the exhibitors, it would appear, had a copy of the Rebel conversion kit for X-Wing 2nd edition. So, as such, they opened it up and photoed it all and put it on their Facebook page. Fantastic. So now we have all the information on what would appear to be all the stuff from that kit. However, there does seem to be a few anomalies here, a few things missing. There is definitely at least one card missing from this. That's one of the upgrade cards, because there's a condition card referring to a car called Listening Post or something like that. And that card is not pictured, which tells me that there's at least one other card that isn't here. Also not pictured is a copy of the Maul card. So hopefully FFG haven't missed that out, but I'm going to guess that there is a few things missing here. Doesn't appear that we've missed out any pilot cards, but just be aware there is a chance that they have. So yes, in this video we're going to focus on these pilot cards. I'm going to go through this ship by ship like I did in the last few videos. Now we're not going to talk about the ship stats, and we're not going to dwell too much on the pilot we've already covered. If you guys would like to see my opinion on that, just go back to the older videos I've done on these already. For the time being, we're just going to go through these ship by ship alphabetically and take a look at the new pilots we have today. And as I talk about these on screen, the new version of these cards will be across the top, and the old versions will be displayed along the bottom. Starting off with the Arc 170, with Ibit Sam, Gavin Darklighter, Shara Bay, and Nora Wexley. Now, Shara Bay and Nora Wexley were on the original Arc 170, although, interestingly enough, for whatever reason, they have given Shara Bay Nora Wexley's old ability and given Nora Wexley a completely new ability, which is also mirrored on the Y-Wing. Ibit Sam has taken Braylon Stram's old ability, so maybe he'll get a stress bot build, and Gavin Darklighter has the same ability that he has on the X-Wing, which is sharing around his focus tokens while he spends them, which is really, really cool. Apart from that, nothing new to talk about here. Let's move on to the attack shuttle. And once again, there's not really anything new to talk about here. We have Zeb, Ezra, Sabine, and Hera, just like the old attack shuttle. Zeb has a functional reprint of his old ability. Ezra has a similar reprint to his old ability. Basically, he has a recurring force token every turn, and he needs to spend that force token in order to use his old ability, which is to convert 2 of his eyeball results to hits or evades, only while stressed though. And it would seem on the face of it that there seems like a bit of a downgrade from his original version, but there is the added upside of being able to spend that force token when you're not stressed as well, just for a single conversion, so it's a bit hard to say whether that's a buff or a nerf there. Sabine pretty much functions the way she always did, although one of you commented, and I really appreciate this, that the wording on Sabine now says before you activate, which means she can still do this while she's ionized, so she's able to take that free boost or barrel roll even while ionized, because there's no maneuver dial to show. Ionization no longer shuts her down. Hera Syndulla is a functional reprint of what she used to be. If you reveal a red or a blue maneuver, you may change it to another maneuver of the same color before you move. Very cool ability for maneuvering, but didn't really see much play in first edition. PS7 has gone to Initiative 5 though, which is always good to see. PS7 seems to gravitate to around about Initiative 4 or 5, so 5 feels like a little bit of an upgrade on the pilot skill here. Moving on to the Azatuk gunship, and we've actually seemed to have lost a pilot here. Again, it may just not have been pictured. Maybe the Wookiee Liberator will still be included, but for the time being we can only see the Kashyyyk Defender in terms of the generic pilots, and that's fine. Honestly, if this is what happens to the ship, it's not the end of the world. I don't think ships really need 4 pilots as a rule, especially ones that are not seeing play. Lauric and Wolfwara are of course making their way back onto the ship. Wolfwara has gone from PS7 to Initiative 4. As I was just saying, this is something that often happens, and this feels like a slight downgrade on PS7, but to be honest, this ship was really never about high PS anyway, and considering there's no more veteran instincts in the game, that's not going to be the tactic Wolfwara goes for anymore anyway. And speaking of Wolfwara, yes, his ability is a functional reprint. And moving over to Lauric, and I'm very glad sad to see this because Lauric was super powerful in first edition. He still plays around with the same design space. He can spend his reinforced token to help one of his friendly ships. However, you must spend that reinforced token at the start of their defense, as in before they roll dice, and instead of adding one evade result to them, that gives them an evade token, which can only be spent to convert their dice, so it's a much more powered down version of the ability. It can't just negate damage like it always did. Now, to be fair, in many cases it will, but you need to make sure that you have those green dice to convert, and if your friendly ship happens to roll all evade results, it will be all for naught, so there is times where it's just going to whiff. And he's now sitting at initiative 3, which feels like a fair conversion for this pilot as well. Okay, moving on to the A-Wing, and this ship had a fix pack in first edition, which of course means it had several more pilots than the average ship. In fact, it had 6 pilots total, and these have all been cut down to the prerequisite 3 or 4 pilots. They don't have all the included pilots that ships used to have. They're making sure they just get 4, what I assume is designed to be 4 representative of playable pilots on all these ships. In pretty much all the scenarios where we have at least one fixed pack for a ship and a whole heap of pilots, there's usually a whole heap of pilots that don't get played, so there's no point reprinting those. I will say I'm a bit sad not to see Tycho make it onto the A-Wing. He was always a lot of fun, a very spicy pilot, but nonetheless not one that really saw play all that much. Jake Pharrell overall was the much more preferred ace on this platform. The prototype pilot has become the Phoenix Squadron pilot, which I really like, a nice callback to the Rebels TV show. And yes, we have your Arvel Crinid, which is very similar to his old design, but he also gets the added benefit of being able to boost and bump at the same time. And Jake Pharrell gets kind of a weird reverse of his old ability, where instead of being able to boost or barrel roll after he gets a focus token, instead whenever he boosts or barrel rolls, he can choose a friendly ship at range 0 to 1, which does include himself, and that ship can perform a focus action. Which yes, of course, means that ship has to not be stressed, and it cannot have performed a focus action already. So a slight powering down of his ability, but still a fair one in my eyes. Okay, moving on to the B-Wing, another ship that got a fix in first edition, which has had a bit of a trimming of the pantheon of pilots it originally had. Blue Squadron pilot remains in the game, PS2 to Initiative 2, which seems like a slight upgrade in my eyes. Dagger Squadron pilot has become Blade Squadron veteran, okay, why not? And Braylon Stram has also been added onto the B-Wing. And interestingly enough, Braylon Stram is kind of a functional reprint of Ibert Sam. Ibert Sam was PS6, Braylon Stram is Initiative 4, and instead of being able to reroll 1 dice when he's stressed on both offense and defense, he gets to reroll 2, which feels fair enough. Also, 10 Num has taken Kayan Farlander's ability. Unfortunately, only Initiative 4, but I must say I do like what's happened with a lot of these ships. They have a lot of different pilots printed at the same initiative, and I don't know why this was never really done with the old pilots. It always felt like there had to be this linear pattern of having all these different pilot skills, and I didn't really feel like that was ever necessary. We can have different pilots at same initiative with different abilities that move into different design concepts, and that feels okay to me. I don't feel like there has to be different pilots, different costings. And I really like how 10 Num and Braylon Stram both have mechanics that play around with stress. I think this really plays off what the ship's trying to do, especially with those 1-speed Talon rolls, those knife fighting abilities, the ability to do a red barrel roll, essentially a quasi push limit built into the ship. This is going to be a lot of fun. And not pictured here is the B-Wing E2, which was one of the old fixes for the ship where it gets a crew slot. Obviously the B-Wing is just going to have a crew slot, well at least we assume it will, and it won't have to cost an extra point either. The great thing is that this ship can simply cost a little bit less, and I feel like that's one of the key things holding it back. The way it plays off of stress, the way it has better ways of getting itself stressed. This may not seem like significant fixes, but I think this ship's going to fare a lot better moving into second edition for these reasons. Here we have the E-Wing. First up, looking at the generics, for some reason they've switched the art on these. Okay, why not? Instead of PS1 and PS3 respectively, we now have Initiative 2 and 4, which is a big upgrade in these generics. I quite like that. The E-Wing feels like a platform that shouldn't really have PS1s on it. Not really what the ship's about. Also, we have here Gavan Darklighter, and this text on this card, okay, I think I have to eat my words here, guys. I was talking in the previous video about the Hawk and how it was talking about using certain abilities in Arc, and how I assert, well, if the card doesn't say there's any range restriction, then it will be infinite, which I feel was okay in terms of power level on those cards. But what we have here, Gavan Darklighter has taken Etan Abat's ability, except there is no range restriction on it, and my gut instinct now is yes, from this point on, everything that says in Arc will, by default, have a global restriction of range 0 to 3, because it's a functional reprint. time, except they have not given us the range. And that leads me to think, look, I don't think they're going to give this ability a massive buff. I think that's just going to be a hard and fast rules. We will see when the new rules are printed, but yes, I am now leaning more towards the notion that Hawks do not have infinite range abilities. I am more than happy to admit when I'm wrong. Also, Karan Horn, who we saw previously at Initiative 5, has functionally the same ability that he always used to, except it now only works in his bullseye firing arc. Fair enough, really powerful, and I think nerfing Karan Horn is good because it means we can make the ship overall a little bit cheaper, and that's going to make all of these pilots more relevant, not just Karan Horn. And hey, speaking of the Hawk, here it is. Previously, we did not have Kyle Katarn and Rourke Garnett revealed, and they've switched pilot skills. For some reason, Kyle Katarn is now a lower initiative than Rourke Garnett. Poor Kyle. Anyway, Kyle Katarn's ability is the same as it always used to be, except instead of being a range 1 to 3 bubble around the ship, it's now inside the firing arc. Indeed, all of these abilities on the Hawk are now exactly the same, except they only work in the firing arc, which honestly, given the fact that it can rotate its firing arc, and it can also gain a bonus primary firing arc in its forward quadrant, leads me to think that yes, this is a bit of a nerf, but not a big one. I still think these guys are going to operate just fine, and the overall buff to the ship is going to really help this platform a lot. Okay, moving over to the K-Wing, and we seem to have lost the Guardian Squadron pilot. Again, a generic pilot that we never really took anyway. The Warden Squadron pilot was really the choice when it came to the generics, and considering none of these pilots have EPTs, there was really no point investing in a slightly higher PS ship anyway. Ashish Tuketu seems to have the same ability that he always did, but just worded slightly differently. Friendly ships being able to treat their focus token as your own, as opposed to it may spend your focus token as if that ship has them. Just one thing that doesn't not seem to cover is the requirement to have focus tokens in order to use some special weapons. It would seem the wording on this new version no longer allows that, which is a bit of a shame because this guy really never saw play anyway. So yeah, not quite sure what's going on there. Although I will say the nerf on Miranda is very, very healthy for this platform. Again, if we nerf the only pilot that really sees any play, it means we can buff the ship overall, maybe make it a bit cheaper, and perhaps these pilots that don't see play might be a bit more relevant moving forward. Miranda, of course, we talked about before, PS8 to Initiative 4, a little bit of a downgrade there. Also can only regenerate shields when it has none, and only get the extra dice from its primary weapon. A big downgrade for the pilot, but probably a fair one. She was very repressive on the meta, so I'm not going to complain there. Here we have the Sheathapede class shuttle, and all the pilots here are pretty much as is. We previously saw Fren Rao here, has the same ability that he always did. It is worth noting though that he does say spend tokens to modify dice, and this is interesting because it kind of plays around in 2nd edition in a different way that the original version did. There are now ways to use target locks that don't involve spending them, so that's a slight nerf to his frame, but it does actually prevent the spending of force tokens, which most effects don't do. I was really expecting him to say green tokens, not all tokens, so that seems really, really powerful. We'll see what other kind of interactions he has moving forward. Apart from that, Ezra Bridger is the same ability that we talked about before. Zeb Aurelius is the same superfluous ability he always had. I don't know why they reprinted this ability on Zeb Aurelius in the Sheathapede. I do not see any reason to take him over AP5, but yeah, whatever, he's here. AP5 was previously revealed, and he has a slightly different ability that he always used to. Being able to coordinate ships with exactly one stress, still very powerful. It means he can't take the stress tokens off the friendly ship, but it also means that he's not taking stress tokens, so that kind of unlocks him a little bit, and that means he may play a bit less of a support role moving forward, which would be cool to see. Moving on to the Rebel TIE Fighter, Sabine's TIE Fighter. We have Zeb and Captain Rex, and both do the exact same ability they always did. It's also worth noting that both of them have the same initiative. Same with Sabine and Ezra, they both have initiative 3. I like that there are more pilots that are squashed into the same initiative. I feel like that's going to lead to more interactive gameplay. It also means it's easy to fly these things in formation, if for whatever reason you want to take multiples of these. Both Sabine and Ezra have the same abilities that they have on the attack shuttle, so no need to talk about those anymore. But it is worth noting that Ahsoka Tano is no longer on the Rebel TIE Fighter, so it'll be interesting to see if she makes an appearance somewhere else in the faction. This also kind of fuels the theory running around, which I also prescribe to, that FFG are testing the waters in order to look into making Clone Wars era content, and taking Ahsoka Tano off the Rebel faction to me is another big indicator that that might be happening, so we'll wait and see what happens there. We have here the Ewing Pilots, which are all pretty much functional reprints of their old version. It is worth noting that Bodhi Rook is now a higher initiative than Cassian Andor. Which to me makes sense. I mean, Bodhi Rook was the pilot in Rogue One. Not really sure whatever happened with the old versions, but whatever. It's a shame to see these abilities get no upgrade, but it is worth noting that most of the fixes that we're seeing from the Sour's Renegade pack for the Ewing seem to mainly involve reducing the points cost and giving it more modifications. Both things that happen entirely within the X-Wing Squad Builder app. So in terms of a fix for this ship, yes, we're mainly looking at that. Also, it's worth noting that the pivoting wings did get a bit of an upgrade in that they allow you to move your ship 90 degrees, not just 180. So this upgrade for this platform lie mainly in the ship itself, not the pilot abilities. Here we have the VCX-100. Not a whole heap to talk about here. Lothal Rebel is at Initiative 2, Chopper also Initiative 2, and instead of giving ships heat bumps a stress token, he now gives them 2 jam tokens, which I like a lot. In terms of creative space, it's not dissimilar to giving them a stress token. It still prevents them from doing certain things, but I like jam tokens a bit more, and I feel like this is the kind of thing that FFG would have done with Chopper if they had jam tokens at the time of designing him. Kanan Jarrus does a very similar thing that he used to, except now the ships that he affects must be inside your firing arc, so it's very relevant to note here, you are able to use his ability at the rear arc, but it means you must have a ship docked in order to do that. So the way you play Kanan and the way you interact with the Phantom is very telling of how his ability is going to work. Plus, instead of spending a focus, you spend a force instead, which is actually a bit of a buff because force don't go away. You have 2 and they replenish by 1 every turn. So that seems really, really good. Hera Syndulla, yes, as we mentioned before, same deal, is a functional reprint of her old ability. At Initiative 5 now, which seems really good on the Ghost, that actually contends with a lot of aces. So it will be cool to see whether or not Hera gets any play moving forward on that basis alone. Okay, moving on to the Falcon, and then there's one really cool thing I want to talk about with this ship. First of all, the Outer Rim Smuggler no longer has a reduced stat line like the old version. Yeah, that was playing around with some design space back in the old Wave 2, and they're not doing that anymore. From now on, ships do not change stats based on which pilot they have. Chewbacca's had what would appear to be a bit of a slight downgrade. Instead of flipping all his face-up damage cards, he now only is able to do that once per turn because of the recharging charge token. Seems a bit harsh considering Chewbacca wasn't really seeing play towards the end of first edition. Having said that though, it does seem like a really powerful effect that in the right circumstances could be abused, so I do like to see that. Han Solo now has the ability to reroll all of his dice regardless of which ones were rerolled. So basically you get to do another entire attack if it completely stuffs up, if you happen to be close to a rock. But what I really want to talk about is Lando Calrissian. First of all, Initiative 5, again, able to contend with aces, really nice to see. And instead of granting a friendly ship at range 1 an action only on the action bar after doing green maneuver, you now are able to grant that action to any friendly ship at range 0 to 3, and it is any action. Now, off the top of my head, I can't really think of any really crazy action on an upgrade card that you give ships, but that is open for abuse, so it's something worth keeping our eye on. But what I'm most jazzed about is the fact that it's range 0 to 3 now. It really makes Lando Calrissian feel like a proper commander. It basically gives him Super Coordinate. In fact, I'm going to call Lando Captain Super Coordinate from now on, you guys. The Whitey 2400 has had a few changes. We no longer have Eden Vril. I think that's fair enough. This ship iconically was flown as the Outrider, so Liebherr and Dash Rendar are the most important pilots here. We do have the Initiative 1 generic and the Wild Space Fringer, and yes, of course, the Outrider title, Whiz Heavy Laser Cannon, has essentially been burned into the card. It's still able to attack at range 1, but it only attacks with 3 red dice. Kind of like an inverse of the Falcon, which attacks at range 1 with 4 dice, and range 2 to 3 with 3. Dash Rendar is probably a functional reprint. We don't really know how ignoring obstacles only when you move affects actions, but I'm going to assume moving forward that it still allows him to use actions. If you're ignoring a rock while you move, then surely you're not going to hit it, you're not going to take stress and roll a red dice and lose your action. That seems to be all part of it. What's most interesting here is Liebherr. Liebherr no longer interacts with face-up damage cards. He now gets a calculate token after a defense or attack where he spent one. Now that means you can't stack them up, it is worth noting that, but it means he gets one turn after turn after turn, no matter how many times he attacks. And remember, ships with turrets can now attack multiple times thanks to some of these upgrade cards. No matter how many times he defends, he kind of has this soft buff on across all his dice rolls. Now yes, it does mean he has to take the calculate action, but what I particularly think we need to look out for with Liebherr is any way to cheat calculate tokens onto him. I think that's really going to unlock the potential of this pilot. Apart from that, really solid solid, and maybe we'll just see Chiweebo builds happen again moving into 2nd edition. Alright, getting toward the end, guys, we have here the Y-Wing. The generics are now at initiative 2 and 3. Dutch Vander has a very similar ability to his old one, but now he says you ignore range restrictions, excellent, and also the friendly ship getting a target lock can be at range 1 to 3. Worth noting, it doesn't work at range 0, and yes, before you guys ask, a ship can take target locks at range 0 of another ship if it is coordinated or use advanced sensors, so that is a possibility moving forward. And also Horton's Psalm, which kind of works the way he always did. We're talking about rerolls, but instead of rerolling all his blanks at range 2 to 3, he now rerolls a dice for every ship at range 0 to 1 of the defender, which kind of feels a bit like a scum ability, being ultra aggressive and having a high risk, high reward, but yeah, still cool. We had a lot of fun playing around with this. I will say I'm a bit disappointed they kept the same art. I never really liked it. Kind of looked like his nose scooped down a little bit, but I will say very happy to see the old Gold Squadron Pilot art go with those wonky engines. Never really liked that. Gold Squadron Veteran in 2nd edition looks way better. And the lucky last ship we have to look at here is the Z95 Headhunter. The Bandit Squadron Pilot and Tala Squadron Pilot are now at initiative 1 and 2. And actually, on the subject of the Bandit Squadron Pilot, it is worth noting it now has the lowest initiative. And in 1st edition, the Bandit Squadron Pilot was at PS2, the Binyari Pilot was at PS1, but it has an illicit upgrade slot, and that was the way they were able to justify those ships sitting at the same points. Now the fact of the matter is the Bandit Squadron Pilot is sitting at initiative 1 just like the Binyari Pirate. We don't know whether or not this version of the Z95 is going to get the illicit slot. Obviously, since the old pirate was designed back on the Scum faction, there has been a little bit of illicit upgrades creeping into the Rebel faction, so maybe these guys might get the illicit upgrade. Apart from that, if that does not occur, it just seems like there's a chance that the Scum version of the Z might just happen to be a point or two more expensive, which is relevant because it means it'll no longer have one of the cheapest ships in the game. Lieutenant Blount no longer hits everything he shoots. He has the ability to upgrade his attacks. Kind of like a weaker version of Horton Psalm's ability, he gets one reroll if there happens to be a friendly ship of the defender. So I don't know, maybe there'll be a really aggressive build with Lieutenant Blount and Horton Psalm. We'll see how that works out. And Iron Kraken's ability has taken a slight nerf. He still gives a friendly ship at range 1 after he attacks an action, but it now treats it as a red action. So kind of like a bad coordinate, if you will. And before we finish up here with the pilots, I have one more picture to show you guys. In every one of these conversion packs, we get a little bag of what they're calling new pilots. I mean, a lot of these ships we've seen already have some new pilots, but these are like beyond the prerequisite 4 or 3 pilots that we have anyway. So Nora Wexley and Thane Kyrell already appeared in the game before, but here they are on the Y-Wing and the X-Wing, and Ivan Verlaine also on the Y-Wing. Really cool to see. I gotta say, I was really hoping for more of these quote-unquote new pilots, but I guess if they're only going to offer new pilots to a finite amount of ships, it may as well be the X-Wing and the Y-Wing, which are pretty much the two most iconic ships in the faction. Ivan Verlaine is initiative 3. At the start of the engagement phase, you may spend 1 focus token to choose a friendly ship at range 0 to 1. If you do, that ship rolls 1 additional defense tile while defending each round. This seems really, really good. This seems to be playing around with the space that Biggs and Lauric used to play around with in the last edition. It's not adding results, it's just allowing you to roll 1 more dice, which, yes, of course, only has a 3 in 8 chance of evading anyway. So it's kind of like a softer version of those abilities, which is fair enough. Adding evade results is not a thing that a lot of ships get to do anymore. Nora Wexley, we have talked about before. While you defend, if there's an enemy ship at range 0 to 1, add 1 evade result to your dice results. Again, this is a ship that does get the ability to add more evade results, but it is a ship with only 1 green dice, so that doesn't feel too bad to me. Now, Thane Kyrell, we just said this guy before on one of the spreads in the original Rebel article, but we didn't see the bottom of this text. While you perform an attack, you may spend 1 of your paint results in order to look at the defender's face down damage cards, choose 1 and expose it. That's really, really nasty. Also, at initiative 5, so this is the same initiative as Luke, and that ability is super nasty. Again, ultra aggro. This actually might be an archetype moving forward with the Rebel faction. Be really cool to see. In any case, all 3 of these pilots look perfectly playable, and it'd be really cool to see the X-Wing and the Y-Wing back on the table again, that's for sure. Anyway, guys, that's all of the pilot cards we saw from this particular leak. There was also a heap of upgrade cards. I will get to them in a later video. In the meantime, guys, thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter, and I will catch you guys later.